All right. With that, we will call to order the regular meeting of the Borough Assembly for Monday, November 1st, 2021. Will the clerk please call the roll?
David,
Here.
Mark,
Mark is excused.
Bob,
Here.
Jeff,
Here.
Jay,
Here.
Thomas,
Here.
Chelsea. Thank you.
Those listening at home, we have 5 live here in chambers and member Mucci on the Zoom call. With that, let us rise for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Stands one nation.
There are no minutes to approve today that I can see. Brings us to amendment and approval of meeting agenda. If there are any amendments, please bring them forward. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve. Member Tremblay.
Yes, I'd like to amend item under new business resolution 2021. That should be -14 instead of 13.
Oh, isn't a clerical error of fixing that?
Yes.
Understood. Is there a second?
Second.
Right on.
Mr. Mayor, I have an
Yes.
agenda item I'd like to add.
Okay, so we've got that one amended, and now member Lynn has
Oh, I'm
it.
sorry.
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Under discussion items on, I'd like to add a topic called standards for volunteer projects, if you would.
Clerk Thompson, do you have that standards for volunteer projects under discussion items?
Yes.
All right. Any opposition to that amendment by member Lynn? Okay. In that case, I would entertain any other motions or entertain to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second. Been moved by member Tremblay, seconded by member Kensinger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, our agenda has been approved. Brings us down to public hearings. There are none. No bid awards on this fair day, which brings us to item 7. Persons to be heard related to today's agenda. I see no members currently sitting in the audience that seem inclined to participate. So I'll turn it over to you in the queue, Clerk Thompson, if there's anybody who would like to today.
We have no one.
None, okay. Then I will segue that into item number 8. Is there anyone in the queue for views unrelated to today's agenda?
There are not.
There are not, okay, so it goes. Nothing for board, commission, and committee reports, nothing on the consent agenda. With that, item number 11. Report of other officers brings us to PMC CEO Phil Hofstadter will provide us a report. The floor is yours, Phil.
Thank you. I'll just report out on 2 areas. One is a Cobit update, and the second will be just some activities to be aware of related to PMC. So first with COVID, obviously we had a significant outbreak in September leading into October. It appears we're on a downward curve. However, as of this morning, we keep having cases, a couple of cases over the weekend. We had 3 cases just in the last hour. So we're back up to 20 active cases, something to be reminded of, make sure that we're continuing to mask and distance and do our normal mitigation strategies as possible. We have testing available at the hospital. Tuesdays, it's asymptomatic. So if you just want to get yourself tested, it's free from 9 till noon. And we'll make sure we have information out there in the community. I want to thank the school for just continuing to do a fantastic job on testing. They also provide at-home antigen kits, which is basically an at-home test you can do within 15 minutes. It's super. I'm hopeful. Sandy and I have been talking about maybe working with our medical staff on getting a process and trying to get that for more available to anyone in the community. I think it has a lot of opportunity and applications going forward. Vaccine information, there's certainly a lot of confusion out there. So We'll get some information on our social media, but there's the third dose is available for immune compromised. You have to be moderate or severely immune compromised. There is approval for the Moderna booster. So that is available for 65 and over and 18 plus with underlying medical conditions or anyone that works in a high risk setting, such as healthcare, grocery workers, teachers, first responders, et cetera. You can have mixed doses as well with the J&J, and the state has just published some information on that. We'll get that out there as well. If you have any questions, please contact 772-5788 and click the vaccine option if you want to get yourself scheduled, or contact our hotline 5788 for more information on that. You can also contact Jen Briner directly for vaccines if you have questions or get scheduled at 772-5704. So we want to make sure that that information is pretty clear. Let's see. Any questions on COVID? All right, I'll just move on to activities. Our staff have been working hard the last 8 months on a major project for our electronic health record. It's a new electronic health record system called Cerner. Pretty major project. It will have some impact when you're scheduling in the clinic. So we'll get some information out there on there's some forms potentially that we'll want people to fill out, and we'll get some information on what it means to the community. It's actually pretty exciting. There'll be a lot of things that'll be improved within our system internally and have good input back to staff as well. So more to come on that. We're still waiting our community needs assessment that was completed over the summer. We went out to have it compiled and put together in a publication, and then that will be presented to the board when it's ready and also available to the public available on our online, but also we would like to actually provide an opportunity to present it to the community. Update on a new facility. As I reported at the board meeting, we're really excited that Mikowski's office for the HHS funds, they did get to the next level for the 8 million. We're hopeful that it'll continue down the track of approval. So we'll be monitoring that going forward. And we also had an invitation out to search with our board to provide a presentation to our board. And so we're still waiting for a date and some information back from search to make that available, but we'll let the assembly know when that is going to occur, as well as the community. It should be a public meeting, so there should be an opportunity to listen in on that. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Hofstadter? Thank you as always, Phil.
Thank you.
Right on. That brings us down to PMPL rate study presentation. John, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. I'm just going to turn it right over to you to talk about the rate study with the assembly, and thank you.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon. It's nice to be with you today. Even though in the past I've been able to come up and visit you. But in this case, what I want to do today is just go briefly through the rate study that we've conducted for Petersburg Municipal Power and Light. And the format that I'm going to use, and this won't really take too long, but provide a bit of an introduction. We'll go into the projected revenue requirements, look at revenues at existing rates, describe a little bit of the cost of service analysis, and then conduct or basically provide the results of the proposed rate adjustment options. So let's see. What are we looking at here? Can you see my slides at all?
Yep.
Oh, can he not see it maybe? John, we do have them up on the screen. Can you not see them?
Well, okay, what I'm seeing is just basically the File Explorer page, but that's okay because I have it printed out and I can see it myself. So as long as you have them, I'm over on what's identified as page 3, where it says introduction.
Sounds
And
good.
okay, so here we go. First of all, we're going to go through the key issues, and what I want to provide for you is the key issues in this are that energy sales are estimated or projected to basically stay very similar as we go forward, and there's a slight assumption of increases in energy sales. The cost of SEPA power, yeah, I'm down on the one labeled key issues. Now I've moved on there. There we go. Okay. Second bullet is that the cost of SEPA power, your main source of power, is projected to increase in the near future. The SEPA annual refunds, which have been received for a number of years, or rebates as they're sometimes called, are no longer expected in the future. That's a pretty big chunk of money. A very important issue that you now have in front of you is the funding of the capital budget. There are sources of funds that go to pay for these modifications and improvements and upgrades that come from current revenues or from reserves, you know, the money that you've got essentially reserved from past operations, and then new long-term borrowings. And then another issue that we've been looking at is there are some imbalances in the cost of service amongst the customer classes. So that's something we've been adjusting here. Next slide. The energy sales, this is just to kind of put it out here. Basically 44% of all of the energy sold in Petersburg goes to residential customers. 31% goes to large commercial customers, 16% to general service, and then the two smaller classes are municipal and harbor. And these are the 5 classes of customers that we define when we move into the cost of service analysis. So there are 5 groups of customers defined more or less by somewhat similar energy consumption characteristics. Total sales in fiscal year 21 were 53,543 megawatt hours, or 53,543,000 kilowatt hours. It's estimated, because I didn't have at the time the study was performed here, the the actual end of year numbers that ended in June. This is basically up through, I think, about May or something like that. Next slide. And the cost of purchased power in the past, and even at the present time, you've been paying 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour purchased from SEPA. Many years ago, we used to always just call that the tie purchase, but it's now a combined source of power from the SEPA resources. This power is expected to go up basically this month to 7.05 cents per kilowatt hour, and then 7.3 cents per kilowatt hour in May of 2022. The 6.8 has been in place since SEPA was founded, and it goes back even before that to the Fort Pool, and I think even before that. So this increase to 7.3 cents is roughly about $250,000 in increased power purchase costs for Petersburg. So that's one of the major cost increases that has to be factored into this whole analysis. The SEPA rebates, those are significant in the past. In fiscal year 2019, that was $686,000. And our presumption here is that is not going to continue. And we haven't seen it for the last couple of years. So that's another factor as far as increasing the revenue requirement for the utility. Capital expenditures, these are significant in the sense that, as you're all aware, you have the blind Slew upgrade project estimated to be about $8.4 million that needs to be funded. And a new diesel generator at Scow Bay, another $1.5 million. The funding sources, these can move around a bit, but what we basically came up with as what appears to be probably the best approach to it all is to have about 1.2 million funded from current revenues. And this would be over a 5-year period, fiscal years 21 through 25. So some of this has already been spent. About 3.7 million will come from the reserves that are essentially assigned to Power and Light. And then 7.3 million will come from new borrowings. And it's important to note that the new borrowings actually will be funded through a bond issue that is more than the 7.3 million because of the need to fund a debt service reserve fund and pay some costs of issuance. So just looking at the revenue requirements, you can, if you wish, just focus on the bottom line, which shows the total revenue requirement. If you look between 2021 and 2023, you can see the impact there of the increased costs and power purchases and debt service associated with the new bond issue. Those are the two big items that are bumping this cost up almost $1.2 million over that period of just a couple of years. So as we look at where you are right now with the current revenues, the estimate is that in fiscal year 2022, which we're in now, current revenues at the existing rates would be about $6 million, 5.99. In 2023, that's still roughly the same amount. That's what the rates we're currently at. But looking at the revenue requirement on the top line and subtracting out these existing revenues, we see by 2023, we've got about a 1.1 to 1.15 million of additional revenue that's needed. And that represents about a 19.7% increase overall. So moving on to the cost of service analysis, just a very, very brief description of what goes on with that. We're looking at the 5 customer groupings with similar customer or similar energy consumption characteristics, as I mentioned before. And with the cost of service analysis, we go through the process of classifying and allocating the costs, the unit revenue requirements of the utility to the various customer classes. And the approach that typically goes into this kind of analysis, and which was done for you, is looking at the revenue requirements, as we just looked at. We define billing determinants, which are the measurable components of what customers can be defined as. And everybody has a meter that indicates how many kilowatt hours they consume. Large customers will have meters that show the amount of kilowatts that are consumed. And then, of course, there's the number of customer accounts that goes in. So we define these allocation factors associated with these various costs and determinants, and then allocate the costs to each customer class to define what's the customer's or the cost of service. The whole idea is basically to say, what is it actually costing to serve each grouping of customers? And it varies depending on the type of energy consumption that you generally find within these customer classes. This next slide is basically just defining a little bit of the information that goes into these allocation factors that we use. There's demand allocation factors. For the most part, the costs of the physical system are allocated based on demand. That is the actual need for power at peak periods of time during the year by various classes. The system is built to essentially provide power under peak conditions. Energy allocation factors are the ones based on kilowatt hour use. Customer allocation factors are essentially looking at the idea of how much is it costing to bill customers and costs that might be associated with each individual customer account. And then some of these factors we combine in order to determine what the costs will actually be assigned to each group. And looking at this, for fiscal year 2021 costs and revenues, the existing rates are shown on the green bars. And if you look at residential, you'll note that the average unit revenue received from residential customers is just under 10 cents per kilowatt hour. This is during a typical year, and it's average for all residential customers. However, the cost of service, the cost to serve these residential customers is just slightly higher, and I didn't put the numbers on there, but I have those if we want to look at those. For the harbor customers, the existing revenues are slightly above the cost of service, and the same with general service. Large customers, large commercial, cost of service is a bit more than what we saw earlier there, above the actual cost of service. And then municipal customers their revenue is noticeably below the cost of service. Now, this is just looking at the costs in 2021. So as we move into 2023, which is where we kind of are trying to get to, go ahead and what we've done is looked at the revenue requirements projected to be in 2023, and these are the costs, the revenue requirements that will include the new debt service and the new higher purchased power costs, and define what rates the options might be for what they could be. The objectives for the new rates are that they have to recover the full annual revenue requirement in that year, 2023. And because we've got a little bit of time to get there, the idea would be with providing two adjustments, 2 separate years, so that it's not quite the full amount, just all at one time. And as you recall, when we were looking at the revenue requirements, it was close to 20% increase that was needed, about 19.7%. And another objective of the new rates would be to move closer to cost of service for all rate classes. And with regard to residential customers, it usually is important that smaller consumers don't see quite the same impact as those who consume a little bit more on a percentage increase basis. So that's one of the design factors that goes into this. After fiscal year 2023, it looks like the revenue requirements probably stabilize a bit. So there's a good chance that once these rates get adjusted here, you may not need any additional adjustments or increases for a few years after that. Can't say that absolutely until we get there, but it does appear that the revenue requirements are stabilizing once we get through these big adjustments with the new debt service and the new higher power costs. And then because of the fact that some of the capital costs are being paid for from reserves, the total amounts of reserves are projected to decrease to about 3.6 million. And I think that's roughly about half of where it currently is at the present time. So we're drawing those reserves down to help pay for some of the capital costs. So let's see. Here comes the slide with all the little numbers on it. So that might be somewhat difficult to look at. But as you can see on this, there are two blocks, one being the year one adjustments and the other being the year two adjustments, where we kind of get to what we're calling the partial cost of service. It's moving closer to cost of service for all the rate classes. Roughly, there's about a 9.9% increase in year one, and this just is part of the proposed rates. And in year two, it bumps it up to another 10% above that. So we're just under 20% total. But if you look at the bottom line on this chart, note that residential customers are projected, according to these proposed rates, to go up 21.5% over the 2-year period. And that's slightly more than the average, which is just over to the left of that. Harbor rates would go up 19%. General service rates 19.3%. Large commercial 16.2%, and municipal 34.9%. Now this adjustment proposal is something that has a lot of leeway in it. The basic concept is you still need to get roughly almost that 20% total, but it can move a little bit differently amongst the various rate classes. And in some rate adjustments, you'll oftentimes see that governing boards will say, well, we want the same increase to all rate classes, in which case everybody would have a 19.9% increase. Others move slightly less towards cost of service. And in your case, the one thing to note is that fairly significant increase to the municipal customers. So, this is something that is subject to discussion. So as we move on to the final slide, this just shows what everything kind of looks like when you're all done. The green bars, once again, are looking at where we're at with the existing rates, whereas the yellow bars are the cost of service in 2023 with all of the increases that we have projected to be coming up. And then the blue bars, or the light blue bars, are showing you where the average unit revenue would be for each of these classes according to the proposed rate increase. So as you note, the municipal comes up a bit, but it's still less than all of the other rate classes. Large commercial and general service get a little bit closer on the blue bar than where they are at the current time. General service is still a little below large commercial. And then, of course, residential is below harbor and below general service and even below large commercial, but still slightly above municipal rates. So that's what I have to present to you today. And I don't know if there are any particular questions right at this point in time, but I'm certainly available to answer that and certainly available to answer them as they may come up.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to your associates as well for the detailed work on this rate study. And with that, I see Member Lynn, you wanted to ask something?
I do. John's Bob Lynn. I've got a number of questions here for you. In the rate study, when you finished it, and we look out, say 2023 and beyond, what is the estimate that you think we need for reserves, power and light reserves, in the municipality here? And as part of that question, will what you've proposed here get us to the point at which we have those reserves in hand?
I didn't hear the very last part of that.
Oh, the last part of the question was,
Yes.
is with the rates adjustments you've proposed here, will that get us to the point of having the reserves we need to operate, 2023 and beyond? Will we have those in hand?
Right. One of the elements of our assignment was to actually look at the necessary reserves for the utility. The reserves are primarily defined to be needed for emergency repairs or anything that might come up kind of out of normal. And the estimate, I don't actually have it right in front of me, but as I recall, we were looking at approximately $3 million is what the minimum reserve should be. And so this approach that we've got here does still leave you above that at 3.6 million. So the reserves should be sufficient to take care of some of the emergencies that might come up. With regard to looking out farther into the future, the revenue requirements do not show significant increases as we go past fiscal year 2023. And that's primarily because we're getting through this period of time with adjustments in power costs, and then also getting you into the position to fund the capital adjustments and improvements that are being worked on right now as we go forward.
Just a quick observation for the assembly. In addition to the number that John's coming up with, the assembly looks at this every year with the budget policy document where it sets our working capital numbers that we want to have on hand. So, so when you get to this year's budget and you're looking at those numbers, you also have to look at John's, stuff. So it's a combination of the two. As far as what, not necessarily totaling them, but as far as what we set that number at. Jody and our auditor, we've talked about, I think, 3 or 4 months of operating capital.
Roger that. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Member Lynn, did you have further questions?
Yeah, just the last one for John. That the rate increases also included the CPI, your estimated CPI increases of that approximately half a cent over that period of time, I assume.
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from members of the Assembly? Mr. Hagerman back there. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add a little more to the reserve discussion to tack on to what Steve had said. So it's the budget policy is for the utility to have about 1.9 million. And so we're adding $1 million to that in order to make these emergency purchases that John spoke of. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that clarification. Member Walsh.
Yeah, I was wondering, is the time frame, the time frame for the rate increases, is that necessary, or is it possible to spread that out over a longer period of time? Or is that necessary for debt servicing purposes? What's the thinking there?
Right, that's a very good question. I consider one of the primary drivers in this is that the rates more or less have to be at this higher level by the time a bond issue is conducted. Primarily from the standpoint of being able to support the additional debt service that will be forthcoming with the rate increase. So that's something, I mean, with the bond issue. So that is something that I think is important to consider. When we started looking at this, the idea of an increase in fiscal year 2022 was something that was potentially going to happen a little before where we're at right now. But the idea would be to say that by the time you get to the beginning of 23, on July 1, that you're more or less going to have the rates up to this higher level very closely to then. Now, it might be that some of the issues related to how the new debt service comes in on the new bond issue might allow you a little bit of flexibility as to where you go with all of that. But that's one of the reasons to kind of get going on it sooner rather than later when it comes to the first increment of increase. And then the second one can be kind of the final one that trues you up to where you absolutely need to be at that point. But it doesn't usually seem like you've got too much time that you can wait after the bond issue to get this going.
Member Fine Walsh, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Right on. Member Muti, since you're up there, if I'd give you an opportunity in case you wanted to chime in. If not, no worries.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions for John.
Mhm.
On the pie chart that you have on slide 5, what falls into the category of general services?
General services are what used to be called small commercial.
Okay.
So they're businesses that are smaller, and for the most part, they are not demand metered. So they aren't paying a demand charge. They are paying simply just a kilowatt hour charge.
Okay. And then back on the SEPA rebate of $686,000. So that has been more or less discontinued because that money is now being used to get things back closer to normal, or is that why that's stopping?
I don't know the exact reason for the decline or the dropping of those refunds, but I do know over the years that costs have continued to increase a bit for SEPA, and as you're aware, in very recently, they've had to make the big repair on the submarine cable. And so what they basically felt was necessary was to retain those revenues within SEPA to pay the costs of continuing that system.
All right, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Any further members of the assembly? Member Kensinger.
Yes, what will be the impact of when we replace, if we get to the point where we're actually shutting down Blind Slew Harbor or Blind Slew Hydro Project? What will that have on the rates?
That's actually a good point. And I assume when you say shutting it down, you mean taking it offline for the repairs as opposed to
Right.
getting rid of it. Yeah, what we've factored in for that is a reduction in energy from Blind Slew over that construction period that I think drops from an average of around 1,200 megawatt hours per year to around 900. So there's a period of time, and I don't actually know the the number of months that we're down in there, but we have factored that in. And what that means is that during that period of time, there's additional purchases to be made from SEPA to supplement the loss of the power from Blind Slough. But that is factored in.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the assembly? John, again, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Pull up the mayor's report here. It is brief. The Petersburg Borough is accepting letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community as board member to the Southeast Alaska Power Agency, or SEPA, for calendar year 2022. The Borough Assembly will appoint, oops, bear with me, I just lost that, that's fun. There we go, back in the game. The Borough Assembly will appoint one voting member and one alternate to the SEPA board. Letters of interest should be submitted to Mayor Jensen or Clerk Thompson at the borough offices located at 12 South Nordic Drive by sending to P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, AK 99833, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. Like I said, it was short and sweet today, and I'll pass it over to the manager for the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Just wanted to put out another big thank you again to Ty Cummings and Mattingly Electric for their work at assisted living on the deck. It's really wonderful to have local tradesmen that can produce such quality work. Also, thank you to Sally Dwyer, who ramrodded the project, and to all the donors who made it possible. The ramp to Outlook Park Shelter will be repaired soon. Please have some patience with us during the repair and stay clear of the area during this time. Parks and Rec needs more lifeguards. They are hosting another lifeguard training course for November 19th through the 21st. Please contact Scott Burt as soon as possible to get registered for the online training to be completed before the classes start. He can be reached at sburt@petersburgak.gov or by calling 907-772-5446 for more information. Reminder, Parks and Rec is working on placing a light at the ice skate pond. Please contact Parks and Rec Advisory Board or Stephanie Payne with comments or input. Contact information can be found on the borough website. Water staff was working on pre-winter maintenance on all of our air release valves on the Cabin Creek water line. And thanks to Public Works for completing the hydrant flushing and winterization ahead of any freezing weather. The Ira 2 street sewer project is ongoing. Rock and Road is finishing up with the mainline installation this week, and we'll drop back and finish off service connections next week before cleaning up the site and shaping up the road by November 12th. Power and Light staff is working with Vackerstead contractor and inspector to ready the building for permanent power and meter installation. And Crystal Lake spilled for approximately 3 to 4 days after the heavy rains recently. So staff turned off the pump back system to help reduce water levels. Upon the lake level dropping below the spillway, we scheduled a trip to the site to clean up any silt that may have carried into the sump. Pump back is back on and working as intended. Lake level is within 9 inches of spill currently. Power and Light is still waiting to hear from ADOT regarding the street lighting quote that was sent out for Papke's Landing Road. And interviews for the next mechanic operator were held this past week, as Bob has announced his retirement soon. McMillan, Jacobs, and Gilks Hydro are working through the calculations of price adjustments to the Blind Slough hydro equipment procurement contract. It is anticipated there will be no currency-based adjustments to the contract price, but that copper and magnetic steel pricing increases will translate into a minor increase to the contract. Assembly will likely need to approve the adjustment amount in order to move forward with the notice to proceed on the hydro equipment manufacturer and procurement. Carl's working with Jody to complete the Power and Light project bond sale application for the Alaska Bond Bank. And we had a little hiccup in EMS. The 1-year-old ambulance gurney is out of service due to a cracked frame. Sandy is working with Stryker for repair replacement as it is under warranty. We're using a backup until resolved. We are continuing to accept volunteer applications for fire EMS and search and rescue. Emergency trauma technician course scheduled to start on November 7th with the BLS prerequisite course on November 3rd. Contact the Petersburg Volunteer Fire Department if interested. And thanks to PMC providing flu shot clinic for the volunteers, and to Matt Garrett's for keeping the Station 1 grounds looking so good through the summer and fall. We've had some significant maintenance issues with the roll-up doors on the apparatus bay at the fire hall. Sandy has requested a professional door person to come to Petersburg, as we've been unable to get it to work right ourselves. Visitation continues at assisted living. Call 772-2445 with any questions. Masks are required to be worn in the borough buildings. Please do not visit assisted living if any symptoms of being ill, and if you've traveled, consider a COVID test prior to visiting. The DirecTV conversion seems to be working well, and the residents are happy. And PMC doctors continue to see residents for routine appointments at assisted living, and PMC offering elderly housing and assisted living residents flu shots at the manor. So thank them very much for that. The state background check program is working on getting back to limited capacity. Hopefully we'll be able to enter applications electronically and maintain applicants online again. Big thank you to the police department in being very flexible and helping Sheilene get the fingerprints for potential employees. Assisted living handed out candy on Saturday the 30th from 6 to 8 in the lobby, so thank them for that. And our state licensing inspection is completed. We are now licensed for 2 more years. Streets crew replaced 26 deck planks on the Rasmussen Bridge on 1025 and 1026. The deck was last replaced in 2014, and we intend to do a full deck replacement in 2022. Happy Snow Removal RFP is being advertised with proposals due to Public Works by November 4th. And the motor pool shop repair project is ongoing. The drywall finisher is on site at present. We're still anticipating that we will be moving into the new building for the winter season. We are already noticing that the rehab facility holds heat much better than before. The new insulated garage doors and upgraded building insulation are definitely making a difference and should reduce heating costs. And just a reminder to folks, we still have garbage bears out there. We've had several reports of bear activity in the last week, but we're keeping an eye on it. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Questions for the manager on this fair day? Steve, thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Clerk Thompson's a bit of housekeeping here. Our amended agenda, that was for 21-14 under new business.
Yes, it is.
Got it. Just making sure I didn't make a mess of it before we go any further. All right. That rolls us into unfinished business. Ordinance number 2021-15. An ordinance updating chapter 9.04 of the municipal code entitled Disease Control to update language and reflect borough incorporation. Third and final reading. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Motion has been made by member Kensinger and seconded by member Tremblay. The floor is open to discussion. Seeing none, I guess I'll briefly chime in. For those listening at home, this was passed in its first 2 readings. Amended last time by member Lynn. I think it's a good ordinance. I guess I was going to do this last time, but better now than never. You know, some of the concerns about this were speakers have spoken to was around power and control and putting too much power in the hands of some borough officials. That's been roundly rejected as a false assumption. This is very appropriate in cleaning up some very, very archaic city language. Even without member Lynn's amendment last time, I thought plenty of safeguards were in place. So I look forward to hopefully passing this in its third and final reading. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is unanimously in its third and final reading. Bringing us to item B, ordinance 2021-17, an ordinance updating various provisions of chapter 14.12 of the municipal code entitled sanitation. Third and final reading. And for those listening at home, this was approved unanimously in its second reading. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by member Tremblay and seconded by member Kinsinger. The floor is open to discussion. Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That passes unanimously on its third and final reading. Brings us to 15, item A, resolution 2021-14, resolution of the Petersburg Borough in support of redistricting map designated Senate minority proposed southeast. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Then motion's been made by member Lynn, seconded by member Tremblay. Discussion. Member Tremblay,
I have a amendment. I've-
proceed.
I've emailed the language to the clerk already. I don't own a printer, so I didn't print them. Apologies. Whereas only, this would be the last whereas in the resolution. Whereas only one current proposal maintains Petersburg Borough boundaries while also including the entirety of Kupreanof Island, as well as the Stikine River Delta, both areas of cultural, economic, and ecological significance to our borough.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And second by member Mucci. So that would be above, therefore it be resolved to be an all new last whereas.
Correct.
Thank you for that clarification. Discussion on the amendment. I'll briefly chime in. I think that's a good clarifier and a good amendment. Member Tremblay, I'll definitely be voting yes. Any further discussion on said amendment? Member Tremblay.
Just to clarify, I did do a geography check with both Liz Cabrera and the manager. We walked through the other 4 options, and it is true they either split it at within the borough, split up Kupreanof, or split at the Stikine River Delta. So
Clarifier, thank you.
yes.
Will the clerk,
Mr.
please call the roll on the amendment. Oh, member Mucci, sorry.
That's fine. I was just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I don't think this is a perfect solution, but I think this is the best of all the maps that were put forward to us. So, yeah, I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Roger that. Will the clerk please call the roll on the amendment?
David,
Yes.
Chelsea? Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Okay, that amendment passes unanimously. Now we're back to the resolution as amended. Any further discussion on that? Member Fine Walsh.
I just want to chime in real quick and thank Assemblyperson Tremblay here for all the work that she's done, attending meetings and doing research behind the scenes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member Fine Walsh. Any further discussion from the assembly on this? Member Kensinger.
Yes, I'll be supporting this one because of all the proposals, this does not combine us with Juneau or Ketchikan. And I think it's in our best interest to be with smaller communities in the region.
Thank you, sir. And I, for my own 2 cents on the matter, I very much agree with what member Mucci and member Kensinger have said. Anytime we're going through redistricting, it's a work in progress. And I do think this most accurately will represent our interest as a smaller community. Further discussion from the assembly? Clerk, please call the roll on the resolution as amended.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes,
Thank you.
and that resolution passes unanimously. New business item B, Blind Slew Hydro Equipment Procurement Contract. I'm going to read this one just for those listening at home. Utility Director Hagerman recommends that the Assembly approve the issuance of a notice to proceed to Gilks Hydro for the Blind Slew Hydro Equipment Procurement Contract, and further accepts an $89,795.08 increase based on a contractually agreed metals market adjustment to the contract. The total contract value for supply of specified project equipment would be adjusted to $2,092,191.08, and the equipment manufacturer and supply would commence immediately. I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Second.
The motion's been made by member Lynn and seconded by member Tremblay. Discussion. Carl, care to chime in briefly for those listening at home who haven't paid attention to this, just for a point of information?
Sure, I can give a little bit of background.
Sure.
Yeah, the Assembly did approve an award to Gilks Hydro back in February. That award was contingent upon financing for the project coming together. With the recent overwhelming support and the local election of the bonding issue, that financing is coming together. So the contract with Jilks did have provisions for issuing a notice to proceed when funding was available, and also for adjustments because of the lag in time between the award and potential notice to proceed, which could have been next year at this time. So there were some provisions put in there for any currency exchange differences between the award of the contract and the notice to proceed. Happy to say that there were not significant enough currency fluctuations to have that be an issue. I was actually a lot more worried about that than it was the metals adjustment. But the adjustment for currency is a 0. Also, an adjustment for manufacture of the generator on the unit. There's a lot of copper and steel that go into that. And so the vendor did want to have an adjustment in place for fluctuations in that market. That market did increase to the point where the calculated adjustment would be the 89,000 and change. And that does represent a 4.5 increase to the overall project, Blind Slew project, but well within the contingency that we had planned on for the combination of metals and currency. So my recommendation is to move forward with this and get the components in process.
Thank you for that, Member Hagerman, or Director Hagerman. Member Kensinger.
Yes, Carl, once we vote on this, if we approve it without locking the price in, and that's what we'll be paying then.
That is correct.
Thank you.
No further adjustments after this.
Further discussion or questions? Clerk, please call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea, Bob,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. On to communications. We have correspondence received since October 15th, 2021, which can be viewed on the Borough website at your leisure. Assembly discussion items. Clerk Thompson, could you read it off the exact wording Member Lynn used for our first discussion item?
Yeah, mhm.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I wrote it down. Where did I write it down? No fair. Oh, yeah, maybe on this. Oh, thank you. It's for volunteer projects. Thank
Thank you. I was going to
Becky.
butcher the wording. Standards for volunteer projects. Member Lynn, this was your discussion item. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I've been thinking about some of the recent activity we've had with volunteer projects, and I really think that they're great. And I think we've had recent experience with 2 of what I consider somewhat complex projects. And now I think we're at the point that we need to look back, and it began to raise a lot of questions for me. And those questions were, is it, first of all, for consistency purposes, as we treat one volunteer group and look at another, but they need to be the same. And the next part of that, as I looked at it, is if I was one of the department heads, I would like to know what the rules are I need to follow when I'm working with these groups. And so I think there's a number of questions here that need to be looked at. And that's why I call it, I think we need some standards out there for these projects. And the kind of questions that came up in my mind were, is that if somebody comes forward with one of these projects, are we going to use our building inspector to look at them? Are we going to, for instance, waive all the borough fees for these? Are we going to require a set of plans depending on the activity? Are they all going to have to be ADA compliant? If that, and I think that the answer to that is yes. Are we, what's the borough's responsibility and how do we take care of that? Our liability is what I'm talking about. How do we take care of that? And particularly if they look at, if they involve long-term commitments of costs, how do you approach that? What do you do with it? And then I'd look also at is what position would we take, for instance, if it requires state involvement in one of these projects? How do we take a position on it? Does a manager have authority to approve? Where do we go? I just think that, and these questions begin, and another one I guess I'd talk about is if the project, for instance, required $100,000, do we proceed with a project before the money's in hand? where are we at? How do we go about this? And how do you assure that that money's in hand before you start the project? Again, it raises a lot of questions for me, but I do believe we need some standards. And I believe they need to be consistent. And with that, I'll open it up to see if the members agree, disagree with me. But I guess I'd like to see the manager take a look at that and maybe come back with something January, February timeframe to see so we could kind of get all on the same page on on this. With that, I'll give it for.
Yeah, thank you, Member Lynn. I think I'll chime in right away. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, since it's your discussion item, you cut me off. I'm speaking out of line, but two of them that come to mind right out of the gates, we had a public-private partnership on Rotary with the park. And just most recently at the last assembly meeting, the deck project at Mountain View Manor. Those are kind of things you're touching on there. Okay, just making sure it's clear. And no, I think for those of us who've sat on the assembly during those, there's the issues have gotten muddier than they've needed to be, or more complex for all the reasons you brought up. And I know for myself, and I was thinking about this at the last meeting, of not wanting to set ourselves a bad precedent for future public-private partnerships. It can be a great opportunity to get things done efficiently and do good stuff for the community, or we can screw it up properly if we put our minds to it. And I think directing the manager to kind of line up a framework to bring before us is a very prudent move, so we can make things smoother for these things in the future. And I'll open it up to any of the other assembly members who want to comment on it today. Member Kensinger.
I think any project that I believe we have to go out for bid for borough projects right now if it's over $30,000. I think I'd like to see that in whatever Steve would work up if this meets with the Assembly's approval.
Thank you, Member Kensinger. Member Mucci, care to chime in on this one? Yep, I see that hand. Go for it, sir.
The raised hand, just like in high school. Yeah, I agree with Member Lind. I think there needs to be a borough policy on this. I mean, both the projects, the Sandy Beach Kid Playground and the Mountain View Manor, they're great projects, but I think we need to have a budget in place. The department heads and the city manager for sure should be signing off on these projects and make sure they fit what we have. And I think that we need to make sure we have the funds in hand. And I know contingencies come up that are unforeseen, but I think we need to deal with it. I know the children's playground out at Sandy Beach Park still needs some ADA requirement stuff done to it. And so me personally, I don't think that project is done. But yeah, I think there needs to be some borough oversight on anything that's done on borough property. And yeah, I'm all for having a policy put in place to define what we got going on. So if volunteer groups do come forward and want to do something, it's not a mystery that what they have to do. So yeah, I'm all in favor of making sure we get started on this. So yeah, thanks a lot for Member Lynn for bringing it up.
Thanks, Member Mucci. Before we move on, I'm going to briefly touch base with you, Mr. Manager, with the comments Member Lynn shared and kind of the loose direction he's going to throw out there. Does that give you like a framework to kind of get started for us, or do you need some more clarity from us? What are you thinking, sir?
No, this will be plenty. I mean, I just want to caution. I mean, one of the things about volunteers is we love them to pieces, and so many things wouldn't happen if we didn't have access to them. I mean, let's face it, the Sandy Beach Park and the deck at Mountain View Manor would not have happened if the volunteers wouldn't have gotten involved and gotten organized. So, it's always the tough decision about, you want to put a bunch of the borough purchasing rules on them when they're raising the money. So, I mean, I'll do a first draft on this and then let the assembly kind of weigh in it. But I mean, it's one of those things. So, you mentioned bidding preferences. If a volunteer group's putting together all the money and the borough's not being asked for money, do we care about bidding preferences versus a delivered project that meets all our rules? That's the stuff that will drive volunteers crazy, and we don't want to drive them away. This is stuff that is hugely valuable to us.
Exactly.
So anyway, I'll put something together.
Cool, appreciate it. Member Lynn.
Thanks, Steve. My intent is not to push them away. My intent is just to make it more consistent, and so that if a group wants to take on a project, here's kind of the standards that you're going to need to follow to go with it. And here's, by the way, here's some contacts that you'll need to follow up with, those types of things that as we go forward. I really like some of those community projects because it puts ownership in and those organizations accept. And I like that. I'd like to see some of that continue. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the spirit of what you were saying there. That's kind of the camp I'm into. Member Tremblay.
Yeah, just thank you to Member Lynn for bringing this up. And I agree with what the manager said. We want these groups to be involved and engaged, and we need the power of the community to make a lot of this kind of stuff happen. And I just see this conversation as being something that enables that goodwill that is the heart of these projects to actually come all the way through, even to the end. And some of that comes through best with clear expectations and guidelines. So looking forward to the conversation as it continues.
All right, moving on to assembly member comments. The floor is open. No comments today. Recognitions. Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I was able to call into the Share Coalition meeting this week, and I would just like to thank all of those members for all the work that they're doing to make Petersburg a more equitable and safe place for everyone. Part of that is coming up in January is the point in time count, and Humanity in Progress is collecting winter gear to be a part of that. And if you are a group that wants to be getting engaged, contact Ashley Kawashima or Annette Bennett or any of the other board members. That's a time when we do the count of people who are housing unstable in the community. And that number is an important guideline for people doing grant work and other kind of direct service stuff. And so thank you to those groups, and I'll have more details on that as we get closer to the time. But if people are around in January and want to help connect people to services, that's a great place to be.
I don't, thank you, Member Tremblay. Any further recognitions? Member Fine Walsh.
I want to recognize work done recently by Brian Richards, who I believe hosted a meeting to discuss the possibility of building some walking trails in our community. And I just want to thank him for his efforts and the other people who have been involved in that project. And I'm really excited about what they're working on, and hope to see some progress there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good point. More trails, more the merrier. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to, let's see, I'll read this off. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session to receive advice and information provided by the borough attorney concerning the remedies available to the borough in regard to a sales tax delinquency.
So moved.
Seconded by Member Lynn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? With that, we will adjourn to executive session to begin in 5 minutes. Allow people time to file out.